Starting off at number 10 now, we have White Death. The White Death is said to be a vengeful spirit in Mexico who hunts down anyone who knows about her existence. If this ends up being true, I'm sorry to drag all of you guys into it. She's said to be an undead girl with cold black eyes that weep blood. She glides but never walks and stalks her victims like wild animals, chasing them back to their homes. Then she waits until night and knocks at your door. One knock means she wants your skin, 2 for your hair, 3 for your bones, 4 for your heart, 5 for your teeth, 6 for your eyes, and 7 for your soul, which she will swallow whole. At number 9 now, we have La Lechuza. According to legend, she was a witch who used magic to turn herself into a giant white owl. It's said that she sold her soul to the devil to become more powerful. Sometimes she appears as an owl the size of a human being, with the head of an owl and the body of an elderly woman. She is said to wait outside the house of her victims, crying out into the night until they step outside. Moving on to number 8 now, we have the Phantom of the Park. In the small city of Yarel del Progreso lies a park called the Benito Juarez Park. It's built on the remains of an old forgotten cemetery. The locals say this disturbed the spirits of the dead there and unleashed a deadly curse. Every night the benches were vandalized and nobody knew who was causing the damage. The city hired a security guard to patrol the grounds. One night, around midnight, a dense fog emerged and crept out over the park. The guard heard the cries of a woman, and then he saw her, a shadowy figure lurking near the park benches. It looked like an old woman in a long white dress. When he got closer, he saw she had no legs and was floating above the ground. Then she attacked him. He managed to escape and told his boss the very next morning. A few days later, he died of a mysterious illness. Locals have accepted the Phantom of the Park now, and they know a mysterious illness will fall upon anyone who sees her at midnight. Next up at number 7 now, we have La Malinche. This story dates back to 1522, when the noble Aztec woman La Malinche had 2 sons with the Spanish conquistador Cortez. He told her he was going to return back to Spain with his sons. She had a dream where one of her gods appeared and said, if you let him take your children, one of them will return and destroy your people. The night before Cortez departed, La Malinche escaped with the boys. Cortez's soldiers chased them to the lake on which Mexico City now lies. Just before the soldiers captured them, she stabbed the boys in their hearts with a dagger and dropped their bodies into the water. She screamed out into the night, saying, "Oh my children." In the century since then, many Mexican families have reported seeing her ghost wandering the streets at night, grieving the loss of her children. The families lock up their kids for fear of her doing the same thing to them. Next up at number 6 now, we have La Planchada. In the 1930s, a nurse known as La Planchada worked at Hospital Juarez. Her name roughly translates to the Ironed Lady. She fell for a doctor, but he left her for another nurse. La Planchada was distraught and fell into a deep depression. She deteriorated and eventually succumbed to an illness which killed her. Legend says that she returned to the land of the living with a hatred for all nurses. Ever since then, she walks the corridors of hospitals at night, caring for patients while they sleep, but ready to release all of her anguish if she comes across another nurse. At number 5 now, we have the Red Car. This legend tells of a group of witches who travel the roads looking for men at night. They're also known as the Carriage of the Witches. The Red Car travels between Mexico City and Cuernavaca. The passengers are 3 witches disguised as beautiful women. When they see a man alone by the side of the road, they pull over and try to get him inside. If the man accepts, he is usually found sometime later, lying lifeless by the side of the road, battered, bruised, and with strange arcane symbols all over his body. It's thought they're sacrificed to the devil as part of an occult ritual, and the car is red only because of the blood of the victims. Moving on to number 4 now, we have the Tube House. This is an abandoned mansion in Monterrey, Mexico. It was built in the 1970s by a family of 3 who wanted to make a comfortable place to live for their daughter who was in a wheelchair. When the parents brought their daughter to see the home for the first time, the little girl fell off one of the ramps and went straight through a window, falling to her death. The parents were obviously distraught and eventually put the house up for sale. In the years since then, visitors have sworn they have seen the ghost of the little girl. They always see her standing there in the same window she fell to her death from, waving and smiling forever. Next up at number 3 now, we have El Cucuy. According to legend, El Cucuy is a small, hideous, hairy creature with deep glowing red eyes. He has ears like a bat and a mouthful of teeth as sharp as daggers. El Cucuy comes out at night to steal children away. Some say he can take the form of any dark shadow, which he uses to watch children as they sleep. Once the child is asleep, El Cucuy will pounce and take them away to his lair. Children will hide in their wardrobes or under their beds just to avoid him. He is essentially the Mexican version of the boogeyman, or perhaps the very same person. Alright, moving on to number 2 now, we have Chupacabra. This is the story of a strange strange beast that blurs the lines between fact and fiction. Some describe it as a vicious, furry, lizard-like creature with bulging red eyes, fanged teeth, and a long, darting tongue. Its name roughly translates to goat sucker because of its tendency to prey on goats and other livestock. The animals it attacks are left with every ounce of blood drained out of them. What kind of creature would do this? Is it something natural or not? And finally, number 1 now, we have the severed hands. In Mexico, some people say there exists the Alley of the Hands. In 1780, a priest set up in the town of Alfalfa in Mexico. He hired 2 local boys to help look after his horses. One night, the boys returned to the house to find the priest had been murdered, lying in a pool of his own blood. They ran to get help. The police couldn't figure out who did it and began to suspect it was actually the 2 boys. After intense interrogation, the boys began to blame each other. They were put on trial and found guilty. They were then hung by the neck and their hands were cut off. The hands were then hung on the wall of the alley outside the priest's house as a warning to others. Ever since then, people have been afraid to walk through the Alley of the Hands. Whenever they do, they make the sign of the cross and pray. Locals say that on a cold, dark night in November, you can even see their skeletal hands floating above you in the alley. Moving on to number 9 now, we have El Sombreron. In some parts of Mexico, people swear this mysterious creature exists. Its name roughly translates to the Goblin in English. He goes around wearing a huge dark hat and dresses entirely in black except for his ornamental boots and belt. He preys on the young, especially girls. El Sombreron has an obsession with braiding hair. He often braids the manes and tails of horses, or if there are none about, he braids the hair of dogs. People see the animals with their hair braided like this, they know the goblin is somewhere nearby. When he can't find the animals, he follows young women with large eyes and long hair. He arrives in town with a pack of mules, and when he finds a woman that he likes, he ties up his mules and serenades her with a silver guitar. After enchanting her back to his home, he's said to serve them dirt for dinner, which makes them unable to sleep. The legend goes that a young girl named Susanna was admiring the moon and stars from her balcony one night when she was approached and serenaded by the goblin with the big hat. Her parents were worried and upset by their daughter being out so late, and so they forced her to come inside. The goblin returned every night though, making it impossible for her to sleep. When her parents tried to feed her, she'd always find dirt in her food. Her parents eventually cut the girl's hair and had it blessed by a priest. Suddenly, the El Sombreron had no interest in her and the visits just stopped. He moved on to search for his next victim, and they say he continues his journey even today. Moving on to number 8 now, we have the vanishing hitchhiker. This is an old story burned into the memory of many Mexicans. One night in November many years ago, a taxi driver called Pedro Ramirez was heading for the town of Cazones. It was a warm night, but every now and again Pedro felt a quick snap of cold. Then, on the dark road, a girl stopped him to ask for help. She said that bad people wanted to harm her, and so they sped away from the area together. She said her name was Martha, and that her parents were the owners of the ranch where he had just picked her up from. He took her to Cazones and left her at the house that she wanted to go to. Martha was very grateful and invited him to spend the day with her sometime. Pedro took her up on this offer and returned a few days later. He knocked on the door of the house. An elderly woman came to the door. He asked for Martha and explained how they met. The old woman smiled and said that Martha was her daughter, who had been assassinated 10 years before by drug dealers outside of her husband's ranch. The woman was smiling because this wasn't the first time Martha's ghost had done this. Still, Pedro didn't quite believe her. She invited him in, and there in the living room was a very old photo of Martha looking just like she had the other night. Many people get creeped out by this story, but are also quite glad to know who the girl is by the side of the road to Cazones. Next up at number 7 now, we have the Santa Paula Cemetery. This is said to be a very haunted cemetery near the city of Guadalajara. The story dates back to 1882 and goes like this. One night, a young couple put their 9-year-old son Ignacio to bed. His family nickname was Nachito. Nachito slept with a light on as he was very afraid of the dark. He had 2 lit torches outside of his bedroom window and slept with the windows open. This particular night, storm hit and blew out the torches. The next morning, his mother entered the room to find it was icy cold. She rushed to Nachito but found him dead. He had died from a heart attack due to his pathological fear of the dark when the torches went out. However, a rumor spread that Nachito's heart had actually exploded inside his chest and that his death was actually a curse or the work of demons. He was laid to rest in a cemetery, and the strangeness that began with his death did not end quickly. The next morning, his coffin was found lying on the ground next to his grave. The parents and locals were shocked and had it reburied, but the next morning, the same exact thing happened. It continued like this for 9 straight days. His parents began to think that the boy was so afraid of the dark, he didn't want to be kept in the ground away from the light, even in death. So they created a stone coffin that stood on pillars above the ground so that his tomb could always see sunlight. Ever since then, people reported hearing and seeing a boy that matches Nachito's description wandering around at night. Others have seen mysterious balloons just hovering above the gravestones as if carried by a small child. Many people who hear this story actually go to visit Nachito's grave. Some hope they won't see the signs of him at night, but reports of his sightings continue to this day. Moving on to number 6 now, we have the Cadejo. This is a supernatural character from southern Mexican folklore. There are 2 types of this creature, the white and black Cadejo. They are dog-like creatures. The white one is said to be good, accompanying people home late at night. The black Cadejo is feared as an evil spirit. It does exactly the opposite. It tries to kill people walking alone at night. If the person survives the attack, it's because they are an idiot, apparently. Quite often a person is saved from the attack by the white Cadejo. The two will battle it out until the good Cadejo wins. It's a sight to behold. While they are dog-like creatures, they're often described as being much bigger than dogs. Some reports say they can be as big as cows. They have burning red eyes and goat's hooves. They lurk in graveyards and dark alleys, waiting for their victims to pass by. They have a distinct smell of concentrated urine and burning sulfur, if you can imagine that. People say they move in a very demonic nature with short, jerky movements. One thing to remember about the Cadejo is that its gaze can freeze you in place, at which point you can be easily attacked by the evil one. Next up at number 5 now, we have La Mala Hora. This name translates to the evil hour or the evil one. Either is a fitting description for this being. In parts of Mexico, it's believed to be a wicked spirit or evil demon that wanders country roads after midnight, waiting to attack anyone who walks alone. It waits at crossroads, hoping for a lost traveler to pass by. For the people who have seen it, they fear the evil one more than the actual devil. It first appears as a large black lump swirling through the night air and changing shape. Its shape shifts quickly, getting bigger or smaller at will. People say it resembles a ghostly black shroud or a large black cotton ball. Nobody wants to see it though, for to do so will drive a person to insanity. The demon will try to hypnotize and paralyze people before attacking them. When it does, it rushes forward as a thick black smog, enveloping and suffocating them. The next morning, locals will find them dead at the crossroads and they'll know who is to blame. Next up at number 4 now, we have the Princess of Bufa. This story comes from the Cerro de la Bufa, an area of forested hills and rocky cliffs on the southeast side of Guanajuato. There, locals say an enchanted princess lives at the peak of the mountain. They say that on holy Thursdays for centuries, she will emerge from the mountaintop to call out for a handsome and valiant man to rescue her by carrying her down to the altar in the nearby town. Once there, she will become a human and the town will be restored to its former glory as a booming mining town. However, as with many similar stories, there is always a catch. They say the man who rescues the princess must not be so stunned by her beauty that he cannot complete the journey. He must carry her calmly in his arms all of the way. Cannot look back or lose his step, especially when he starts hearing strange noises behind him. If he does turn around or stumble, the princess will turn into a vicious, hideous serpent and will devour him whole. People say this happens every year because the town has still not met its former glory. Will the snake princess claim victims like this forever? Moving on to number 3 now, we have the mannequin. In a store window in the city of Chihuahua, there stands a bridal mannequin that has become famous in the paranormal community. It's been there since 1930, and at first glance, it doesn't look so creepy, but wait till you hear this. Soon after it was placed there, locals noticed the mannequin bore an uncanny resemblance to the daughter of the woman who owned the store, Pascuala Esperanza. A rumor spread that this mannequin was actually the embalmed body of the daughter who had recently died on her wedding day after being bitten by a black widow spider. Of course, the mother denied all of this, but the legend took hold. People were convinced it was the body of the daughter. The resemblance and just how lifelike it looked were just too perfect. Sonia Burciaga was a woman who worked in the store. She had to change the outfit twice a week and was quoted as saying, "Every time I go near Pascuala, my hands break out in a sweat." Her hands are very realistic and she even has varicose veins on her legs. I believe she is a real person. Well, I thought that That sounded a little bit ridiculous until I saw the close-up of her hands. Now I'm not so sure. I'm only sure that I'm never going anywhere near her. Moving on to number 2 now, guys, we have the Island of Dolls. If you head just south of Mexico City, you can find an island that attracts tourists from all over the world. The whole thing is covered in creepy dolls of every shape and size. There is a famous story as to why. It's said that a girl was found drowned in mysterious circumstances many years ago on the island. Her body was found by a man called Don Julian Santana Barrera. Shortly after, he saw a floating doll nearby. He hung it to a tree as a sign of respect and as a way of helping her into the next life. However, it didn't seem to work. Don Julian was apparently haunted by the spirit of the girl. He began hanging more dolls in an attempt to please her restless spirit. Then he realized what he had done, and it was already far too late. He believed the dolls themselves were now possessed by the spirits of dead girls from all over the world. His friends say that he went mad, as if driven by an unseen force to continue what he started. After 50 years of doll hanging, Don Julian was found dead, drowned in the same area where the girl had died. Now locals believe that his spirit has joined the others on the island. People visit to honor him, the girl, and the spirits of the others. However, most people don't stay too long, and almost nobody would spend a night on the Island of Dolls. And finally, at number 1 now, we have the Seventh Son. This story comes from a remote area near Toledo. In the 19th century, there was a boy who lived in a village. His name was Federico. He was the 7th son in his family. In fact, his father was also the 7th son in his family. Locals believe that because of this, he was endowed with dark occult powers. They say he had second sight and the ability to predict the future. Even more, he had a natural gift for healing, curing anyone of their ailment with just a touch of his hand. Although he was kind, quiet and shy, the other kids hated him because they feared him. Overall, the village wanted nothing to do with him. And so, one night, the village elders held a meeting to discuss what should be done about him. They voted to kill him and then destroy his body. That was said to be the only way the village could be kept safe from the dark forces he channeled. They led him to an abandoned shack in the woods. When his back was turned, they pounced on him and bound him up. In a satanic ritual, they stripped him, hung him from the roof, and then lowered him into a vat of boiling oil. He didn't stop there though. He was still alive and screaming in pain, and so they gouged out his eyes and hacked his body to bits. The parts were then put in a wooden barrel and dumped into the river. With that, they were satisfied. The next day, some villagers went to visit one of the elders. They knocked on his door but got no reply. As soon as they entered, they stopped. There was the elder, dead on the floor. His eyeballs were on his chest. His head had been crushed beyond all recognition. His eyes and feet had also been chopped off. On the ground in front of the body, there was a message written in his blood. Innocent blood has been spilt. Now the guilty must die. After that day, all the elders who were responsible for the boy's death began to die one by one. Their bodies always found in hideous ways. When the last one died, there was another message written in blood. It read, "Now I have been avenged. The guilty have paid their debt."
Alright, coming in at number 10, we have El Somberon. What is a myth or a legend video without the boogeyman? Nothing, that's what. El Somberon is a baffling one, really. He's like a lusty boogeyman with a weird hair obsession. Bald? No worries. Luscious locks? Watch out. El Somberon is said to wear a big black hat that covers the majority of his face. He's a short man with big eyes that poke out from behind a silver guitar that he'll use to serenade ladies with. You'll know when he's been around, as you may find horses with curiously braided tails or a plait in a girl's hair that she doesn't remember placing herself. One tale says that he stood outside on the balcony of a beautiful woman with long hair. On hearing his music, she became mesmerized by him. He returned to her balcony night after night, to the point where the girl actually stopped eating and sleeping. Her parents were worried about her, so they cut off her hair, which immediately made El Somberon lose interest. So gutted, although honestly, probably for the best. A gal needs some dinner. If I had to choose between luscious hair and having a good taco, like, give me the food. Another type of boogeyman is coming in at number 9. This one is less about the hair and more about the drinking the blood of children, so swings and roundabouts really, right? That's right, we have the legend of El Cuco. It is thought that this particular Mexican myth was brought over from Spain in the colonial era. El Cuco in life was a man suffering with tuberculosis, the disease that offed Santine in Moulin Rouge, and honestly, I'm never gonna get over that. Tuberculosis basically was a huge killer. These days, it actually still is an issue in Mexico, however it is curable, thank goodness. In the era of El Cuco though, a cure was a long way off. The legend goes that El Cuco met with a curandero, a traditional healer. She told the man that the only way to cure the disease was to drink the blood of a child and then rub their fat on his chest. Gnarly. So, diligently, El Cuco did this, having no qualms about kidnapping and murdering a 7-year-old boy. What a savage. These days, El Cuco is said to roam the streets looking for misbehaving children to kill to cure his ailments. A modern day myth coming in at number 8, we have El Chupacabra. Is a classic cryptid. A chupacabra is a legendary creature in folklore, a blood-sucking animal vampire hybrid. Its name literally translates to goat sucker. Now the legend of El Chupacabra is most popular in Puerto Rico, northern Mexico and the border states of the USA. It became most prevalent however in modern times. In 1996, following an incident in Puerto Rico, the chupacabra allegedly began killing goats in the Mexican countryside. Now I found a mid-90s article on CNN which quotes a Mexican woman. She said, "It's horrible because we don't know what it is. I don't think it's a coyote or a dog like officials say because a dog can't kill 10 goats with a single blow." To this day, some 25 years later, people still believe that a vampire goat sucker was behind the killings. Often stray hairless dogs in Mexico are mistaken as the chupacabra, which adds fuel to the myth's fire. Coming into number 7, we have the owls.
Row after row of gibberish, and all of a sudden, the owls are not what they seem.
Oh, I love a good owl, I really do. I love how evil they look and like, you're not gonna be messing with no owl, are you? Not in Mexico anyway. La Lechuza is a woman by day and an owl by night. There are a lot of strands to the myth, but it is generally agreed upon that the woman has been wronged in some way and is looking to seek revenge. Some say that the Lechuza snatches children in her talons because her own child was killed by angry villagers for a crime that they did not commit. Others say that her child was killed by a drunkard and so now the shape-shifting owl exacts revenge by perching on the rooftops of bars waiting until closing time to attack drinkers stumbling out into the night. Others think that the owl is simply a familiar of a witch. Either way, the owls are bad news bears. There have been gigantic bird sightings happening over northern Mexico, especially in Chihuahua and Tamaulipas and the Rio Grande Valley of Texas. These have been going on for centuries and a lot of people think that it is the La Lechuza looking for revenge. In general, Mexicans are traditionally distrusting of owls. Coming in at number 6, we have La Lorna. This is actually a very sad and enduring Mexican myth and legend. La Lorna is a wailing ghost that is said to bring misfortune or even death if you hear her cries, rather like the banshee in Irish folklore. The story behind the legend is one of a woman named Maria who was raised in a small rural village. Quite the beauty, she piqued the attention of a passing nobleman who married her and whisked her away from her family to a house outside of the village where she had 2 children. Unfortunately for her though, her husband would travel a lot and when he returned he seemed changed, only to care about their sons and seemingly was disinterested in her. One day, he returned with another woman, which drove Maria to insanity, which I totally get, like get her out. Her husband bid farewell to his sons and ignored his wife, leaving with the other woman. Maria, in utter despair, threw her 2 children in a river. Upon realizing what she'd done, she tried to save them, but they'd been swept away and drowned. She then killed herself and pleaded at the gates of heaven to be reunited with her sons, but the gatekeepers told her that she must find them first. She now is stuck in purgatory as a ghost always looking for her children. It is said that if she finds lost children at night, she drowns them, hoping they contain the souls of her lost sons. If you hear wailing or crying near a body of water at night, you are to run in the opposite direction for fear of being drowned or meeting the bad luck associated with La Lorna. Coming into number 5, we have El Muerto, the headless bandit. The El Muerto tale is truly terrifying. I mean, what isn't to be afraid of? It comes in the form of a headless ghost, which, this myth, or we hope myth anyway, actually comes from the US border with Mexico, dating back to the gold rush era. Now, a lot of people were looking around the border regions for gold. On top of that, the US-Mexico border was hotly contested around that time, with an area of no man's land between the 2 countries. In this area, bandits were rife and Texas Rangers were around to keep them in check because America! One ranger, William Bigfoot Wallace, wanted to teach the bandits a lesson after one persistent criminal known simply as Vidal Vidal stole a bunch of Mustang horses. When he was caught, Bigfoot Wallace and his ranger friends chopped off Vidal's head, sat his body on a horse, attached his hands to the reins, and strung his head to the saddle. Crikey. This was supposed to teach the would-be bandits a lesson not to mess with the Texans, but some poor sod had to deal with finding the horse and its deceased cargo too, which is like a double blow. Despite eventually being taken down from the horse, legend has it that Mexican Vidal rides through the valley of Rio Grande today, with his ghost being dubbed El Muerto, scaring Americans everywhere they are, like, nay, Coming in at number 4, we have the legend of the Crystal Skulls. Crystal Skulls, it truly is a great Mexican mystery. I also love starting things with don't I? Like, Many curious crystal skulls have been found across ruin and burial sites in Mexico, sparking intrigue. There is a myth about the skulls that seems to say that after the 13th has been discovered, mankind will unlock the secrets of the earth and begin a new age. Now, this date was predicted by the Mayans to be in 2012, but we haven't got there yet. Better get looking for more skulls. Myths aside, the skulls are still an enigma due to their intricate crystal work, which would have been exceptionally complex and intricate for the time in which they were created. Coming into number 3, we have the eclipse. Pregnant mamas, watch out. In Mexican folklore, it is said that if a pregnant woman is exposed outdoors during a solar eclipse, her baby will be born with a cleft lip or cleft palate, which is pretty bizarre. So like, why though? Well, it seems that the belief dates back to the Aztec eras, when the best explanation for an eclipse was that a bite had been taken from the moon, possibly by some kind of wolf god. For them it made sense that if a bite could be taken from the moon, a bite could be taken from an unborn child in a womb, should the mother view the eclipse anyway. So to protect her, she would have an obsidian knife placed on her belly before she went out. Now these days the tradition and beliefs are upheld, and a woman tends to take a metal key or safety pin out for protection at night in the event of an eclipse. But honestly, let's be like totally fair, eclipses are pretty rare, they don't happen that often, so I wouldn't be too worried, she says. Coming into number 2, we have the Day of the Dead. Mexicans kind of have a macabre humour when it comes to death, and I can get on board with that, I truly can. Death is coming for us anyway, so we may as well dress it up in a floral hat and have a good time playing with it, right? Rather than fearing for it all of our lives. Party with death? Anyone? Is anyone watching from Mexico? Because like, hello, tell me more about this. The Day of the Dead is a big party in Mexico. It centers on La Calavera Catrina, a female skeleton wearing a fancy hat that's basically the personification of death. She stems back to the Aztec mythology of the Queen of Mictlan, who keeps watch over the bones of the dead and presides over festivals celebrating the afterlife. Traditionally, Mexicans believe that a person has to get through 9 challenges to reach the afterlife, and family members will provide them with food and water throughout this difficult journey. On the Day of the Dead, it is believed that the barrier between the spirit world and the real world dissolves. During this time, the souls of the dead awaken and return to the living world to feast and drink and dance and play music with their loved ones. I actually really kind of love that. It's kind of like a fun day of remembrance without crying and, you know, tequila and sombreros. Okay, we have a crazy and enduring story to end off this list. At number 1, we have the tale of the travelling soldier. The transported soldier legend has it that in 1593, a soldier from the Philippines transported from Manila straight to Mexico City in their sleep. What? Gil Perez was said to have nodded off as he leaned against the governor's palace wall on October 24th, 1593. Now if that date rings a bell, you're about to hear why. You can't blame him for nodding off. He had a very long night because the governor had just been assassinated. He was standing guard as a new leader was being appointed, and he drifted off. As he slept though, curiously, he woke up in Mexico City, and I'm not sure if you've looked at a map recently, but that is very far away, like other side of the world away. Perez was questioned by officials in Mexico who found him. They threw him in jail after he told them that he'd simply just woken up thousands of miles from where he was supposed to be. Suspicious, honestly, I get it. Eventually, when a passenger ship from Manila turned up in Mexico City months later, crews were able to confirm Perez's story about the governor's assassination and the soldier's disappearance. So like, WTF? Like teleportation? Alien abduction? Or just good old-fashioned myth? Let me know what you think.